Okay, let's get started. This is our first unit on South Asia. We got started on Friday talking about river valley civilizations and the transition from being hunter-gatherers to early agricultural settlements to complex and organized societies that we call civilization. Since we start the course off with the South Asia unit, we're going back as far as we can to talk about the first civilizations to emerge in the geographic realm of South Asia. What that means for us is that we are going to be discussing what's known as the Indus Valley civilization. Sometimes archaeologists will refer to this as Harappan civilization, and that's what we're going to be exploring. So just to position and situate the Indus civilization with the others, I talked about this on Friday, but so we're clear again. There are four major clusters of civilizations that emerge in human history. Here is the Indus right here. That is what we're going to be discussing today. Today, it would rest today in the border regions of modern-day India and Pakistan. And if you went back to about 3000 BCE, 2500 BCE, civilization is emerging here. We're going to explore that. We also saw other regions like the Nile River Delta in Egypt, the Tigris and Euphrates River in Mesopotamia, and also the Yellow River in East Asia in modern-day China. Those are the locations. Here's a little bit closer up view of what Indus Valley civilization looked like. Like I said, another name for it is Harappan civilization. That's actually going to be the name of one of the cities. But here is what would be known as the Indus River in a river valley that would flood and could change the soil composite and provide life-sustaining farm potential for the region. But there's a cluster of small cities that archaeologists found. They found the ruins of this throughout there. The two big city centers, one is going to be called Harappa in the north, another is going to be called Mohenjo-Daro in the south, but many other smaller ones. What makes Indus civilization kind of unique and very interesting to me and others is that it's the last of the major civilization clusters to be discovered. It's only in the early 20th century that excavators, people who were actually building railroads there, found the remnants of this advanced networked civilization. So we had known about Egypt for, going back to the pyramids, it's kind of hard to miss them. There had been an advanced civilization in China. We know about civilization emerging in Mesopotamia, but the Indus was one of the last to truly be understood by archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians. So, the early settlement of the Indus, before the civilization really takes off, but we see the beginnings of agriculture. Why and where did it happen? River valleys, we already know the answer to this question. They act as incubators. You guys ever heard that term before? An incubator is kind of like an area that nurtures and is safe for organisms as they begin to develop and flourish. The same thing could be applied to a civilization. Indus was an incubator, just like other river valleys are. Regular water supply, flooding of the rivers, transportation potential, trade potential. Those are all the reasons. We talked about those at great length. But archaeologists know there were settlements along the Indus River, agricultural settlements, small, maybe not fully a civilization yet, but clusters of small little cities, villages, along the Indus River as early as 4000 BCE. As early as 4000 BCE. These would feature things like the domestication of livestock and crops. They would grow specific crops like wheat, barley, cotton, so carbohydrates that fuel a civilization. Cotton is going to later on be used for the manufacture of cloth, which is going to be a significant thing in the evolution of civilization. There's evidence of trade networks. We know that it's not just these little villages and agricultural settlements. They didn't just exist, but they cooperated, they interacted. There's commonalities between them. We see from the excavation there are things like mud brick buildings, bricks that were made uniformly, the same bricks stacked upon to create structures. Somebody had to create that brick. They had to measure the size. They had to maintain its uniformity throughout a vast region. We also know that they have mountainous surroundings. I just want to toggle back to this here. Two big mountain range kind of encapsulate Indus civilization. There's the Himalayan mountains range, a vast set of mountains that are created by the Indian subcontinent in the south, but also a mountain range known as the Hindu Kush mountain range, which would be modern-day Pakistan and Afghanistan. One of the things, just to tie it to a contemporary event, country of Afghanistan, the U.S. Has been kind of engaged in a long military operation in Afghanistan for 17 years now. One of the things that makes Afghanistan difficult to govern and kind of control and maintain order is that the whole country is filled with a large mountain range known as the Hindu Kush mountain range that sprawls into there, as well as Pakistan. This early phase where Indus civilization is kind of morphing from early small agricultural settlement villages to a civilization, it's called the early Harappan phase. And this is kind of before we say there's a civilization, but the ingredients are in place for a civilization to emerge. Just a quick question for you. How might a mountain range help a civilization get off the ground? Mountain ranges that encapsulate it. Any idea? What's a suggestion? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's a natural barrier. It's a protective shell from outside invaders. If a civilization has this, it's maybe going to have a better chance to get off the ground. Here is some of the script or writing system that has been excavated from Indus Valley civilization. We see it's dominated by pictograms, animals being prominent there, but also symbols. Another interesting element to Indus civilization, even though it's one of the newest civilizations that has been kind of discovered by modern-day archaeologists, the writing system cannot be translated. So there's so much that we just don't know about it. It's murky. It's unclear. The cuneiform writing system in Mesopotamia and what is in Egypt and China, that can pretty much be translated. We can fit together a whole lot of those early civilizations. Not as much in the Indus. We're pretty much stuck with the archaeological record. You look at the bricks, you look at the pottery, you look at the jewelry, you piece it around on a map, maybe some satellite imagery helps unify some of that, but that's about it. So you cannot translate the language system yet. Resources of the Indus Valley. If you were doing an inventory to kind of make sense of its economic potential, you'd look at these elements. Copper and precious stones. Copper is one of the first metals that any human civilization usually deals with. You can find it with pretty minimal invasive effort. It falls out of the sides of mountains and cliffs and caves. You can heat it up and fashion it. Later on, people are going to figure out you can mix copper and tin. You create new, stronger alloys like bronze that can be fitted for swords and other tools. So copper, that's one of the elements of the Neolithic Revolution, metal tools. It's happening in the Indus. Precious stones. Anybody got an idea why, if you find precious stones in a civilization as you're excavating, what might that tell you? Lots of precious stones that aren't from the area, but they're there. Maybe they're fitted with jewelry. Yeah. There's trade maybe going on, like your documents 1 and 2 talked about. Anything else it might tell you? Yes, trade for sure. Any other ideas? If people are generating and creating, fashioning jewelry, what might that tell us? Any idea? Yeah. Specialized jobs. Somebody has to be skilled in fashioning that metal and mining those stones and fitting those items. And it's a sign of wealth too. People are now able to adorn themselves with jewelry, and that's a social status thing. So what does it say about the society? It tells you that they have an ability to create social structures. Plentiful water supply, timber, forests for the construction of lumber projects, scaffolding so you could build stone buildings really high. It's the first known civilization to cultivate cotton for cloth, growing cotton so you can create new types of clothing. And maybe that clothing even distinguishes people on the basis of class. So they're not only wearing jewelry, they're now wearing different types of fabricated cloth. And maybe it's decorated. Maybe some clothing looks different than other clothing, and you can tell whether a person's rich versus whether they're middle class or poor. So you can see how civilization starts bringing these class elements into existence. The Himalayan and Hindu Kush mountains, that protected mountain range around it, that helps. And here's a very key thing. The Indus civilization has the benefit of having what are called monsoon winds. Monsoon winds do a couple of things, but let me just clarify what they are. And to do that, I want to look back at this map. Geologists will point out this region of South Asia. It's called the Indian subcontinent. Today it's mainly the country of India. But geologically speaking, it's a separate landmass of tectonic plates that kind of crashes into Asia. And it's adjacent here to the Indian Ocean. And the kind of weather pattern that regularly happens here is what's called the monsoon winds. A monsoon wind is a seasonal weather pattern that brings air onto the Indian subcontinent in a regular fashion, and it stimulates a lot of storms and waterfall, precipitation. But because those winds happen on a regular basis, early Indus settlers and tradespeople, a merchant, someone who's engaged in commercial trade, found out you could capture and harness those winds in the form of boats and sails. So if you have regular, predictable wind patterns, you can move merchant and trade vessels reliably. That's going to help Indus Valley civilization move. And it's going to allow them, like your documents showed, to communicate and trade with other civilizations, like Mesopotamia and the Tigris and Euphrates River. You can sail along the Persian Gulf and communicate that way and trade. So we're going to do something, our first time doing this actually. I'm going to ask you to get out your Chromebook and open up your reflection journal, that document in your folder. Take a minute to do this. Okay. So I'd like you to label this Indus Valley Civilization Large Group 9/11/2018. Indus Valley Civilization Large Group 9/11/2018. In that document, as you're getting into it, just create a label. You want to do the fancy underlining and the bolding that allow you to see it, distinguish it. Indus Valley Civilization Large Group 9/11/2018. Indus Valley Civilization Large Group 9/11/2018. Okay, so we're going to be starting here. Part of it's going to be a regular thing in large group and lecture is we're going to be doing a short text analysis. So here's my expectation of here. You can title this first one Text Analysis Number 1, Power and Class. So right underneath your title, just title this. Put another subtitle. I'm going to read you this short excerpt from a historical description of life in the Indus Valley during this time period. Your task, first of all, just listen as I read it and actively read along. But here's what you're going to be doing. Take what I read here and what you read here, and I want you to condense it, to reduce it down to one summary sentence. The more concise, the more short and brief, the better. That conveys the main idea or ideas. One summary sentence. So just convert this into a summary sentence. I read it, you listen and follow along, and then I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. Text analysis 1. power and class. Because scholars cannot yet understand the writing of the Indus Valley people, no one knows what their class structure was like. The ruins of Indus Valley houses give us little indication of social class. There are a few grave sites in which privileged people were buried with costly treasures. According to a recent theory, the elite of this society were powerful merchants. Seals and stamps, signatures on possessions have been found. Your document 1 and 2 from Thursday talked about this. These may give us the status as well as the name of their owners. If so, scholars might learn how the Indus Valley society was organized. And this is from Brunn, Foreman, and Brodsky, 2002. Generate a summary sentence. Reduce this down to one sentence that conveys the main essential ideas. Expect to be called. Take about another 30 seconds. Remember, your goal is to reduce it to its essential information. Each summary sentence will probably look different. Avoid being too wordy. All right. So, first person I'd like to hear from, they're going to share their summary sentence. Katrina Booth, can you share yours? Thanks. Okay, they're unable to decipher the writing system, and it makes it hard to discover social class or make sense of social class. Very good. Tyler Larson, can you share yours?
Yeah. They had a caste system, and the extremely advanced. They ended up playing tech funerals, and they ended up people where they had jobs at funerals.
Did we say caste system here?
Well,
I mean, later on, the caste system will come into formation.
is that just like the rich and the poor?
Or did you say caste or class? Caste is going to be a little bit more of a social angle, but you're right. Class absolutely is going to be the difference between rich and poor and kind of the opportunities that go along with it. Okay, all right, fair enough. Brenton Peters, can you share one with us?
Indus people might have had the great structure of civilization, but they still might not have. We still don't know because we can't understand the language quite yet.
Yeah, we got a pretty structured civilization, but we don't know a lot. It's still pretty murky. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing with these text analysis often is we're going to be asking you just to boil it down to one summary sentence. Thank you for those of you who participated. I really appreciate that. You'll get another opportunity in a bit. So, if you're regretful that I didn't call on you, as I know many of you are, there will be other chances. They were a little worried, Mr. Ellenbecker, Mrs. Clark.
I can hear it.
The groans were starting to take over the room, I know. Yeah. So emerging, just close lids. We'll come back to it. Don't go into full shutdown mode. Emerging urban centers. There's an increasing use of irrigation when villages and settlements become cities. Higher crop yields, more produce. No surprise there. The two big urban centers, the two big cities that Indus civilization revolves around. One is called Harappa, one is called Mohenjo-Daro. What do we find when we excavate these cities? What are some elements to this? Well, we find, like your first reading said, there's a standardization of objects. Bricks, pottery, tools, all standardized, uniformly created. Bricks that are the same in one village to another, one one city to another. Pottery that can measure the same amount of volume, whether it's pottery that carries wheat, barley, or water, what have you, it can be consistently enforced across a large region. Tools that accomplish the same task, maybe they're made from the same place, maybe there are even markings on those tools that indicate that it was constructed by the same individual. There's an uncertain authority system. I find this to be the most fascinating about Indus civilization. We don't know much about how the authority system works. If you go to Mesopotamia or China or Egypt, archaeologists can pretty much say, all right, we know a lot about who's in charge. In Egypt, they have the pharaohs, they have the whole system of priest class and military. In China, similar things. In Mesopotamia, we have all sorts of evidence and we're able to read the writing and so forth. In the Indus, not so much. So we don't really know who's in charge entirely. There's some evidence maybe it was merchants, maybe priests, little murky. There's a religious system. The Indus Valley civilization is what is called polytheistic. Pretty sure this is a vocab term on your unit objectives, and can almost guarantee it's going to show up later on in many forms in this class. Polytheistic means belief in more than one God. Monotheistic, belief in one God, that's something that comes along much later in Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean with early Judaism, and then Christianity is going to pick up and Islam is going to build on that. But early on, most river valley civilizations are going to be polytheistic. The belief that there are many supernatural God entities that intervene in human affairs and that they need to be interacted with and worshipped and sacrificed to, and a whole lot of other things. There's some evidence that there's a veneration or value towards animals. Animals are found in the script and maybe in some of the religious artifacts as well. The cities are built on grid patterns. That was talked about in your first reading as well. But here's why it's significant. Maybe I know some of you got to this in your reasoning. If you build a city on a grid pattern, that indicates that someone took the time and effort and ability to plan it out. It wasn't just a random connection of villages with weaving circuitous routes, but somebody planned this out, and there was some authority that said, we are going to build these streets, we're going to build these tunnels, this is how it's going to look. There's evidence that they were constructed, the buildings that is, constructed to cope with things like heat. They have high ceilings and windows that move air through. That's going to kind of take into account comfort and reliability in living, kind of proto-air conditioners. They're connected, the cities and villages are connected with surrounding communities, so there's networks of trade. And I think this is also pretty revealing and interesting and thought-provoking. There's limited evidence of weapons. We don't see a lot of it in the excavation. You go to Mesopotamia, there's warfare and violence all over the place. City-states are constantly at each other's throats. Kings and emperors and war chiefs, standing armies colliding. China, to a lesser extent Egypt, but that's a part of what we find in early civilizations. Remember, civilization brings about violence. Not so much in the Indus. Another text analysis here. It's going to be the last one we get to. Same task before you. Do your summary sentence in your reflection journal, right under that title. You can title this specific one, Text Analysis 2, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. These are the names of the two cities in the Indus. A little bit longer this time, so you're going to have to prioritize and kind of discriminate what you focus on in your summary sentence. Here's some tapping, some good subtitles coming into place. Let's get started here. Actively listen and read along. The Indus River Valley civilization flourished from around 2500 to 1500 BCE. That would be something you may want to locate and put on your timeline. In what is now Pakistan. Like Mesopotamia, another river valley civilization, the Indus Valley has a hot and dry climate. The floods of the Indus River brought water and rich soil to the area, as did the Nile floods to Egypt. But unlike the Nile, so we're comparing here with another civilization, unlike the Nile floods, however, the Indus floods did not occur regularly every fall, but came unexpectedly. Sometimes the river did not flood for long periods of time. Sometimes it flooded with such force that it destroyed crops and fields. Therefore, the people of the Indus Valley had to dig irrigation ditches, vocabulary term, and build flood barriers. As in Mesopotamia and Egypt, the population of the area increased. Soon, great cities, among them Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, grew from villages to towns. Scholars disagree, however, about why the Indus civilization ended around 1500 BC. Possibly the Indus River changed its course and surrounding farmland dried up. This happens from time to time. Possibly some disease killed most of the people. The name Mohenjo-daro means place of the dead. Some scholars believe that the cities declined for economic reasons. Their populations may have been moved away or become farmers in the more fertile regions. Brun, Foreman, and Brodsky, 2002. Generate your summary sentence. You have 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. These are also good reference point that if you come to small group, that you can reference what you're writing here. They're good kind of jumping off points for our discussions when they occur. It's very possible you might get a question on a test that relates back to this. So a good summary sentence and following through on this means you're more likely going to comprehend and do well on that question. 20 seconds, I'm going to call a name. Try to wrap up. Devin Rodman, can you share with us? What we got? Yeah, I think that's good. They had to take precautions to you said, make up for the irregular flooding patterns? Yeah, that's a very big point. That was the key part of this whole excerpt, is that Indus, in many ways, was dissimilar to the other civilizations that had regularity in their floods. Not so much. Good point. Glad you brought that up. Haley Westland, can you share with us? She's not here today? Yeah, just read it. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Nicholas Nelson.
I said that even though the Indus Valley was a dry climate, there were floods that came unexpected and that destroyed a lot of crops and people moved away.
Yeah, people moved away. That there was kind of like this decline period, and it's very much tied to that. Environmental disaster, environmental disruption, it happens. It affects civilization. The climate really does matter in that sense, and it affects the Indus. So, thank you for participating. You can close the lids on that one. We're going to close out. Final slide here.
They're coming back to the Chromebooks, so, right? One more time.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes. Keep the Chromebooks out. Yes, there is going to be one thing. The last text analysis. Those of you who just want to dump it in the backpack, put that thing away. Sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Clark, for reminding me of that. Thriving cities. This is the Indus Valley at its peak. So what archaeologists would call mature Harappan, the mature Harappan phase or mature Harappan civilization. It happens between 2600 and 1900 BCE. This is when the Indus are at their peak. Remember, they go into decline, as you saw in that text analysis, for a variety of climate reasons, probably. But it's at its peak here. At its peak, there's over 1,000 cities of varying sizes. That's big by ancient world standards. There's a written language that has things like pictograms, unable to fully translate that. There are some real archaeological and architectural marvels that have been left behind and excavated within the past century or so. One is called the Great Bath and the Citadel at Mohenjo-Daro, and I just want to give you an image of this, and this Great Bath. It's a large, it essentially looks like a huge swimming pool that would have been outfitted with plumbing and drainage, and it was constructed in Mohenjo-Daro. It's right here. That picture doesn't entirely put it into scale, but this is huge. This is built with uniform bricks with extreme precision. When you find something like this in the 3rd millennia BC, that's really impressive, and that's in the Indus. We know from that there's mass plumbing and sewage and drainage systems, so you can get rid of wastewater, you can bring in fresh water. If you're in the ancient world and you are enjoying those things, first of all, not everybody's enjoying that. People who live in maybe these cities, maybe people of some sort of privileged background are enjoying it. But the fact that it's there and it's in existence and people can build it, that's impressive. Reliable plumbing and sewage is not going to be part of our everyday lives until only about the last 100 to 150 years, and even then it's a little bit sketchy. Large aerated granaries. What that means is a granary is a place where you store wheat or barley, and if you can aerate it, you can keep it dry, which means moisture is not going to corrupt the contents of that. Things aren't going to rot and spoil. So an aerated granary, it's like a dehumidifier, essentially. Specialization, another term we talked about Friday. People who specialize in generating just one particular item or a handful of items. People who specialize in farming, the making of bricks, the stacking of bricks for things like temples or that Great Bath. Metalwork, pottery, weaving, making carts, tools. All of these things require specialization. Skilled people who construct them. Common burial arrangements, maybe some indication that there's ritual around death. Archaeologists will see things like how a person is buried, what they're buried with. They'll look at that and interrogate it and try to figure out, why is this person buried this way? Why do they have these contents lying next to them? Is there a reason behind that? And it's a very illuminating situation for people to explore. And then finally, that's a picture of one of the burial rituals next to the pots. You don't need to get this down, but I just wanted to provide for you a list of theories of decline. One was advanced in one of those pieces of text that there was a decrease in precipitation, less rainfall, maybe the wind patterns changed, maybe the rivers dried up. Also some possible speculation, maybe there was a volcanic activity in some place further away that might have affected the rivers or possibly stimulated some tectonic plates being moved. An earthquake, which caused tributary rivers to dry up. Maybe there's some outside invaders. There's limited evidence of this, but there's some evidence to suggest new people may have migrated in from Central Europe, or not Central Europe, but Eastern Europe, that may have reoccupied the region. Here is our final task. In the final 6 minutes of class, I'm going to show you a clip from a BBC documentary called The Story of India. It talks about Indian history all the way through from ancient to modern. Here are your 2 tasks in your reflection journal, so you can open that journal back up. If you don't have the Chromebook, you're on pencil and paper, no problem. Here's your task. Identify 2 big ideas from the clip in your reflection journal. 2 big ideas of your choice, things that we're going to find out about Indus Valley civilization. That's it. Pretty flexible, but things that you can reference from the clip. Any questions on what you're supposed to be doing?